Welcome back, viewers, to the latest researches and news. Currently, we have three major updates that together reveal how close to the edge Ethiopia has come. Firstly, over 26 regime forces killed in a nighttime battle in Amachiho Woreda, central Gondar zone. Fano's 52nd Division repels the offensive. Weapons and ammunition captured. Secondly, we will update you about alarming reports. Pro-government Tigrayan commanders are claiming preparations for an attack on Mekelle. One says his forces are ready. Another claims Mekelle could fall within 1 month. We analyze what this means. And in the last about, the Pretoria agreement is hanging by a thread. A major international analysis confirms what we have been reporting. Both sides are making moves that could trigger the next large-scale war, and the region cannot afford it. Let us begin with a confirmed battlefield report from central Gondar zone. In Amachiho Woreda, regime forces launched a nighttime offensive, moving from Tigrayan toward the Enet Wiha Kebele. A night operation under cover of darkness against Fano positions. They encountered Fano units under the 52nd Division of the Amhara Fano National Movement's 305th Corps. The fighting lasted several hours, and when it ended, regime forces withdrew back to Tigrayan. They did not advance. They did not hold the Kebele. They retreated to where they came from. The cost of that failed nighttime offensive, more than 26 regime forces killed. Among them, 20 Ethiopian National Defense Force personnel and 6 anti-guerrilla unit members. An additional 16 regime fighters sustained critical injuries. Fano also captured small arms and a substantial stockpile of ammunition during the engagement. Weapons the regime brought to Amachiho will now save the resistance. Let us put this battle in context. Amachiho sits in central Gondar zone, an area that sits near the Tigray-Amhara border corridor, in the general zone where Gondar and the northern Amhara front connect. Regime forces launching nighttime operations in this area and being defeated tells you that the resistance in Gondar is holding ground, even as the Ethiopian National Defense Force concentrates resources on other fronts. We have covered Gondar Fano's recent organizational unity, the joint command under the two commanders, for a transitional period. The 52nd Division's performance in Amachiho is evidence that despite the political complications of internal unity, Gondar Fano's fighters on the ground are performing. The regime launched a nighttime offensive. Fano met it, fought it for hours, and sent it back. That is the story of this conflict in Amhara on almost every front, on almost every day. Now to the development that is generating significant concern among observers of this conflict. Two senior Tigrayan military figures who have aligned themselves with the Prosperity Party government figures, who are no longer part of the Tigray People Liberation Front structure, who chose the path of cooperation with Addis Ababa rather than resistance, have made statements that are drawing serious attention. The first, a commander known as Wadi Anbesa, has claimed that his forces are prepared for war. More specifically, he has argued that if fighting resumes in Tigray, he would receive support from within the region itself, from sections of the Tigrayan population, from elements within the Tigrayan military who are dissatisfied with current Tigray People Liberation Front leadership. The second, a figure referred to as Sadkan, a senior Tigrayan commander now in the government orbit, has reportedly gone further. He has suggested that Mekelle, Tigray's capital city, could come under the control of pro-government forces within 1 month. Within 1 month. That is the claim. Let us analyze this carefully, because claims and capabilities are very different things. The assertion that pro-government Tigrayan forces would receive significant support from within Tigray if they advanced on Mekelle rests on a fundamental assumption that the Tigray People Liberation Front has lost the loyalty of meaningful portions of the population and military, that there is a large enough dissident constituency inside Tigray to turn against the current leadership once a military push begins. This is the same assumption that has been wrong before. In 2020, when the federal government launched its offensive, it expected Tigrayan communities to reject the Tigray People Liberation Front and welcome the change. What it found instead was a population that rallied around resistance, that fought back, reorganized, and ultimately reversed the military situation. The Tigray People Liberation Front has conducted public forums in every major city of Tigray: Mekelle, Adigrat, Hausen, Sheraro, Adwa. The participation in those forums, the statements made by residents, the tone of the mobilization, all of it suggests that the population is not waiting to be liberated by pro-government forces. It is preparing to defend against them. Whether Wedi Ambesa's forces have the military capacity to push toward Mekelle is one question. Whether they would find the internal support they are counting on is an entirely different and far less certain question. What these statements do confirm is this: preparations for some form of military action around the Tigray front are being discussed, planned, and publicly signaled by actors on the pro-government side. The claims about timing and outcome may be exaggerated. The intent behind these statements is real. The Tigray People Liberation Front is aware of these statements, and it is preparing accordingly in bunkers, in reorganized army units across Raya, in air defense installations across the region, and in drone testing over Mekelle. And now to something we have been saying on this channel for months, which is now being confirmed by international conflict analysts. The Pretoria Agreement, the peace deal that ended the Tigray war in November 2022, is hanging by a thread. That is not our characterization alone. That is the assessment of analysts tracking this conflict at an institutional level. Here is what has happened since Pretoria was signed. On the Ethiopian government side, the promised return of internally displaced Tigrayans has not happened. Western Tigray, occupied by Amhara militias and forces during the war, has not been restored to Tigrayan administration. The economic siege has not been lifted. Tigray's territorial integrity has not been restored. On the Tigray People Liberation Front side, internal power struggles have defined the post-war period. Authoritarian tendencies within the leadership have not created the conditions for genuine democratic governance. The expulsion of the Getachew Reda faction, which had been the face of the Pretoria negotiations, removed from power the people most invested in making the agreement work. In April 2026, the Ethiopian government extended the mandate of the Tigray Interim Regional Administration for another year, without consulting the Tigray People Liberation Front, even though the Tigray People Liberation Front had previously agreed to that administration's existence. That unilateral extension was the breaking point. The Tigray People Liberation Front responded by reinstating the regional parliament that had emerged from its 2020 elections, a parliament and government the federal government does not recognize. On May 5th, 2026, that parliament elected Debretsion Gebremichael as president of Tigray. Two parallel governments, neither recognizing the other. That is not a peace agreement in operation. That is a peace agreement that has collapsed, replaced by parallel political structures military buildups, and statements about capturing Mekelle in a month. The international analysis is clear. Miscalculations on either side could trigger another large-scale war. Not a war that either side necessarily seeks, but a war that the logic of competing preparations and provocative statements could produce even without deliberate intent. And if that war comes, Eritrea, Sudan, and other regional actors will be drawn in. The Red Sea, already a zone of growing tension, would face another destabilizing shock. Germany, the European Union, and other international actors are being urged to commit firmly to crisis prevention. Whether they will act with the agency this situation demands, given how many other crises compete for international attention, remains the critical unknown. What is not unknown is this: both sides have made their preparations. The Tigray People Liberation Front has reorganized its military, trained new fighters, deployed armies to Raya, tested drones over Mekelle. The Ethiopian government has repositioned troops, established drone positions at Lalibela and Shifra, and is allowing pro-government Tigrayan commanders to claim on the record that Mekelle could fall in a month. The Pretoria Agreement was the last formal structure separating this situation from open war. It is no longer functioning as that structure. What comes next depends on whether any of the remaining diplomatic levers can be pulled in time. 3 stories tonight connected by the same underlying truth. In Lei Amashio, 26 regime forces killed in a battle the regime started and lost. Fano holds Gondar. The resistance holds its ground. From pro-government Tigrayan commanders claims that Mekelle could fall in a month. That support would come from inside Tigray. Claims built on assumptions that history has already tested and found wrong, but claims that signal real intent behind them. And from international analysis, confirmation that the Pretoria Agreement is finished in everything but name, that both sides are responsible for what has happened, and that the next war, if it comes, will not stay in Ethiopia. Wezero Etenesh Demil was killed yesterday by regime artillery in East Gojam. 26 more were killed tonight in Lei Amashio. And somewhere in Tigray, Tigray People Liberation Front leaders are meeting underground because they believe strikes on their positions could come at any time. This is not a country moving toward peace. This is a country where peace has already left, and war is filling the space it occupied. We will keep reporting. Like, share, and subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an update.